by absolutely from scratch in the time era of 2.5 million to 1000 BCE. Now, farming required considerable coordination among communities in this area and this era because of the need for irrigation. Now, in the time period of 3500 BCE, Sumerians who had recently invaded this region developed cuneiform alphabet, which had 2,000 symbols but later was reduced to 300 symbols. Now, scribes wrote on clay tablets, and they used stylus shaped like a ballpoint pen. And what about the Sumerian art? Well, they had statues and painted frescoes, adorned the temples of the gods, and they also had statues of gods just around the place. And science, yeah, they founded astronomy, which is the study of the sun and stars. They also improved mathematical knowledge, and they had religious rituals. In their religion, they had ziggurats, which were the first monumental architecture in this civilization. And they were also polytheistic. Now, they also had city-states which were ruled by a king who claimed divine authority. They also had defense and war, which was a leadership of a trained army. And their warfare? Well, by fighting and getting prisoners, they ensured a supply of slaves taken as prisoners during combat. And from agriculture, what did they gain? Well, they established wheeled carts, fertilizer, silver for exchanging for buying and selling, and this was an early form of money. It was a hard-to-defend region, and they fell to the Akkadians, which then fell to the Babylonians, and they had a king, Hammurabi, and his early code of laws, and that's it for Mesopotamia. But we still have the Egyptian civilization, which was established around 3000 BCE, and it benefited from the trade and technological influence of Mesopotamia, but it was less open to invasion, so it was a unified state with a pharaoh who possessed immense power, and he built pyramids which had exceptionally lively art because of their belief in the afterlife that made people want to be surrounded by objects of beauty, and they were more advanced in math. And they came up with the idea of day divided into 24 hours, and that's it for the ancient era. So now we move on to the classical era, which was from 1000 BCE to 50 CE. Now this was the Persian Empire, which after the fall of the Egyptian and Hittite empires by 1200 BCE, smaller states predominated. So, after the Egyptian and Hittite empires, there were the Assyrians, followed by an influx of Persians. And the Persians were led by Cyrus the Great around 550 BCE. He established the massive Persian Empire, and he advanced iron into the Middle East. So the politics, well, they were white tolerance for languages and culture, and they had a strong authoritarian streak that was ruled by Darius, the successor to Cyrus, and they also had vital infrastructure, which was a major system system of roads that reduced the travel time, but it still took 90 days to travel from one side of the empire to the other. That's not very efficient. Now, examples of this infrastructure include the East-West Highway, which simplified commerce and troop movement from the Indian border to the Mediterranean. There is also another highway which reached Egypt. They also established the first regular postal system with a network of inns along the route. They had a substantial bureaucracy, which was alongside earlier military nobility that was established. Zoroastrianism was also established in this time period, which revised polytheistic religious traditions of the Sumerians through the intro of monotheism. And this established the battle between good and evil, but unfortunately it was toppled by Alexander the Great, and that's the end of the classical era. And so we're in the post-classical era, which went from 500 to 1450. With the Bedouin and nomadic cultures that developed over centuries based on camel and goat herding. But that's not all. They founded Mecca by the Umayyad clan of the Quraysh Bedouin tribe, and that's not it either. They established Medina in an oasis which encouraged sedentary agriculture, and there was the issue of control, which was contested by two Bedouin tribes and three Jewish clans. And women, they enjoy greater freedom and higher status than those who live in neighboring civilized centers, but they're still not considered equal to men. So now there is the issue of religion, which was a blend of animism and polytheism. Now we have Muhammad, who was born in 570 CE. He established the 5 pillars of Islam, which state no God but Allah, and that Muhammad is his prophet. Number 2, pray facing the holy city of Mecca 5 times a day. Also, fast during Ramadan. The Zakat, which is a tax for charity. And the Hajj to Mecca, which a Muslim must make once in their lifetime. So now there was the split of religion. The Caliph was the successor, both political and religious. And then there was the right of wars, which followed Muhammad's death and resulted in defeat of rival prophets and some larger clans, but it restored unity of Islam, and there was jihads, which were holy wars launched to forcibly spread Muslim faith. And then there is the Sunni-Shia split, which was instigated by the murder of the 3rd Caliph Uthman. Now, supporters of Ali, the son-in-law of Muhammad, went up against the Umayyads. So they had a battle of Siffin in 657, which was between forces of Ali and Umayyads, and settled by negotiation that led to fragmentation of Ali's party. So then they had the Muwahhid, which was a new leader of the Umayyads. The Sunnis were supporters of the Umayyads, while the Shia were supporters of Ali. And Muhammad had given women many rights. So little heard of veiled Arab women in this era. And they participated in scholarship, law, and commerce jobs. And in the Abbasid empire which took over next. There was the Battle of the River Zab, which was an Abbasid victory, and they wanted to eliminate all Umayyad to prevent recurring challenges. So they moved the capital to Baghdad, and then there became the bureaucratization of the Islamic Empire. And that's not it. The wealth and social status of merchant and landlord classes of the empire greatly increased, and dows they carried goods of the civilized core to be exchanged with those of others civilized cores, and these ships they were invented by the Muslim Empire, and that's it for the post-classical era. So now we're on early modern, which was 1450 to 1750. In this time period, we had the Ottoman Empire, which was an absolute monarch. But they were more religiously tolerant than other established countries and other established empires at this time. But as the empire increased, sultans grew more and more distant from their subjects, as happens with every empire that grows in size. So as the Ottoman Empire steadily declined, civil strife increased, which was a bummer for the Sunni, because with the Ottoman Empire, the Sunni majority were the champions. So then the Safavid Empire moves in, and there are struggles of rival Turkic nomadic groups. But then the Shia, they were the variant of Islam that was shown, and they were favored by the Safavid Empire. But women faced legal and social disadvantages. And then there was the rapid demise. The city fell, and Safavid power was ended. So that's the end of the early modern era. Now we go to the industrial era, which was 1750 to 1914. The Ottoman Empire is done, and Turkey is born officially. There are also the Tanzimat reforms and the Ottoman Society for Union in Progress, who was a young group of young men, and they wanted the Ottoman Empire back, but they didn't succeed. Then Muhammad Ali tried westernization in the military, as well as setting up cotton textile factories, but he was unable to achieve success in Egypt, and westernization didn't succeed in his country. And there was also the Suez Canal, which brought economic and fortune to Egypt and the Middle East. So that's the end of the industrial era. So now we go to modern era, which is 1914 to the present 2015. There was anger over the British occupation of the Suez Canal, and the Muslim Brotherhood formed in Egypt in 1920, and the Free Officers Movement also kicked off. There's the 6-Day War between Israel and Arab nations, and the Islamic Republic declared after the Shah of Iran was overthrown. So the Shah of Iran became the Islamic Republic. And Iran rejected the West, and the Islamic fundamentalists harbored Al-Qaeda attacks on American soil on September 11th, which that started the war in the Middle East. And that is the history of the Middle East through all the periods, from the ancient to the modern era.